Today I want to talk to you guys about my latest cover story in the New American Magazine. This is about the refugee crisis, how it has Europe on the brink, and what the real agenda is. Because, they're claiming this is about humanitarianism, this is about helping out our fellow human beings. It is nothing of the sort. So let's start with that. The first problem with the argument is that these people who are calling for this mass invasion of people from the Middle East and people from Africa are the same people who destroyed the countries that these people are fleeing from. So what kind of humanitarian burns down someone's house and then invites them into yours? That's not humanitarian. That's criminal. Now, we actually did a cover story on this last year, in October of last year, where we exposed the fact that the same people promoting this influx, this tsunami of Middle Easterners and Africans into Europe and into the United States was responsible for destroying the countries these people are fleeing from. Take Libya, for example. The Obama administration, under the supposed authority of the UN Security Council, joined forces with NATO and some of the European governments to literally bomb Libya to smithereens, to destroy it under the guise of lies. I mean, they literally lied to us. They said Gaddafi was doing this, Gaddafi was doing that, so we need to go intervene. They actually used George Soros's doctrine, this responsibility to protect, as a pretext to bomb Libya to smithereens. So a natural consequence of that was that people wanted to leave Libya and go to Europe. Of course, Europe is richer, it's nicer, it's freer than Libya, and so, why wouldn't you want to go there if your nation was destroyed? That's obvious. Same type of deal happening in Syria. Same type of deal happening in Iraq and Afghanistan. All these different nations that the globalists have targeted for destruction. Now, you have these huge population flows going into Europe. So no real humanitarian would destroy someone's country and then invite them into yours at your expense. That is not humanitarianism. That is criminality. Then we also have the fact that you could care for literally 50 times more refugees in countries nearby these crisis areas than you could in Europe. You could take care of 50 times more people in Jordan or in Turkey or in Lebanon than you can take care of in Sweden or in Germany. For the same types of expenses: food, water, shelter, medicine, healthcare, and so on. So this is not about humanitarianism. The agenda is something else. Now, what is the agenda? So that's the focus of one of the stories that I did, and there are a number of agendas at work here. I want to focus on two in particular. The first one is undermining national sovereignty. Now, we see that happening at breakneck speed. In Europe, you have a proposal now to build a European Union military force. They're calling it a Coast Guard and Border Force to protect the borders from this, literally gigantic onslaught of humanity coming across the borders. I mean, we had more than 1 million in 2015 arriving just in Germany, almost 200,000 in Sweden, and the numbers are growing still. This trend is accelerating. So under the guise of dealing with this crisis that they created, they're saying we need a new EU military force that would have the authority to intervene in member states whether they wanted it or not. So even if your elected officials in your country said, no, we don't want any EU military force intervening in our country, they would do it anyways if the EU decided it was urgent and necessary. Now, does the EU really want to secure the borders? No, of course they don't. And when the Hungarian government tried to secure the borders, the EU went wild and they sent letters and they threatened and they said it was undemocratic and take down that wall and get those troops off the border. So the EU is not interested in closing down the border. Actually, they've thrown down the welcome mat for these refugees and for these non-refugees. Many of these are, of course, just migrants hoping for a better life. The vast majority are middle-aged, military-aged males. And so the notion that this is about securing Europe's borders is patently false. It is a lie. Secondly, you have these exact same globalists, people like George Soros, people like the Council on Foreign Relations, the same ones who advocated destroying these nations, saying now we need to rebuild the Middle East. We need a new Marshall Plan, is the way that the German finance minister, the same guy who wants a world taxation regime, put it. He said we need a new Marshall Plan funded by European taxpayers to rebuild and to reconstruct these nations that we've destroyed. Now, what they're really talking about is very much like the first Marshall Plan, which was used to unite unite Europe in this political and economic union that now calls itself the European Union. They want to do the same thing to the Middle East, and they tell us so. Look in the Council on Foreign Relations Journal, Foreign Affairs. They openly promote this Middle Eastern Union. So that's what they're up to, and it's bad, bad news. As Henry Kissinger explained to us, the path to their new world order is actually to create all these regional orders, these regional governments like the European Union, the Middle Eastern Union, the African Union, which is already quite developed, the Union of South American States, and so on, and then merge them all into this global system. Now that's what they're doing. You have these attacks on fundamental liberties, just liberties that Western civilization has always taken for granted. Liberties like freedom of speech. Under the guise of not offending Muslims, you have people going to jail. Under the guise of not offending refugees and Muslims. In Germany and in other countries, you have people being prosecuted for what they call so-called hate speech, which, speech is now a crime in many parts of Europe. They also are using the pretext of terrorism as an excuse to take away more and more liberties. The European Union is exploiting all this terrorism that's coming about as a result of these policies of destroying Syria, of supporting terrorist groups and dictatorships and inviting all these refugees into Europe. They're exploiting that terrorism, they're exploiting that danger in order to seize and usurp the liberties of the people of Europe, not to mention the sovereignty. The same thing is actually happening in the United States, and Bill Jasper did an excellent piece on that, which goes along with the cover story package. So I highly encourage you to check out the New American Magazine. You can get a print version or you can see it online, and that's available at thenewamerican.com.